Hi, everyone, and happy Friday. Thanks so much for joining us for Cross-Country Creativity, Innovative Pro Bono Models from several states. So today we have representatives from Florida, Tennessee, as well as Texas. And we're really excited to kind of share with all of you, some of the not just challenges that we've seen, but solutions. To introduce our program structures a bit. So I'm with Americans for Immigrant Justice. We're located in Miami, Florida. And so I direct our pro bono program. We do currently have a independent pro bono program within our office, but I originally actually used to coordinate our pro bono work through my role as an attorney with our children's program. So unaccompanied children's cases have always been kind of the focus of my pro bono placement work. And that originally started because we had children who were in the ORR facilities who were at risk of aging out and being moved to ICE custody, so adult detention. And a lot of those children were eligible for special immigrant juvenile status. Once we realized that kind of the need, right, children who qualified for SIJS, who, instead of going to ICE custody would be better served and protected being in state foster care, how many of those children there were compared to how many attorneys we had on staff, we quickly realized that there was really a huge need for pro bono support. So I started training pro bono attorneys on private petitions for dependency so that these children who otherwise would have aged out and gone into ICE custody were able then to be adjudicated dependent, moved into state foster care here in Florida. And that was really successful with pro bono attorneys. And so since then, we've officially launched kind of an independent program in the office. I place all kinds of cases, but still very much the focus of my pro bono placement work is unaccompanied children. The program is actually still just technically me. So I think you'll be hearing that from a lot of us today in this presentation, right? That the pro bono work sometimes can be also really challenging as far as, the realities of what that means as far as staff. And so I'll pass it on now to Stacy.
Hey everybody, I'm Stacey Hammond. I'm the senior immigration attorney at Latino Memphis in Memphis, Tennessee. Like Angela said, I am a one-person shop. You're seeing the pro bono program here at Latino Memphis. And so we really grew out of a need for guardian ad litems for our special immigrant juvenile status cases. The probate court judges here require GALs for all of our guardianships. And so we had kind of overused all of the GALs that we had with other nonprofits in town. And so we really had to kind of get creative and find different people out there to serve as GALs because there's a requirement that they be Tennessee barred attorneys, right? So it's a very limited group of people. And so from there, we now have pro bono attorneys doing full-on guardianships, not just the guardian ad litems part. And we're kind of in a tri-state area, so all over Tennessee and Arkansas and northern Mississippi. And then we also expanded to doing some pro bono asylum work as well, which we'll talk about a little bit later.
Sarah?
My name is Sarah Hanners. I'm a supervising attorney at Catholic Legal Services of Miami. My role is very similar to what Angela was doing, grew out of working with unaccompanied children. CLS Miami, we work with released children, so children who have been released from the shelters. And we don't have a official pro bono program either. I'm kind of in the same boat as everyone else, but the attorneys in the firm help a lot. We do hope to one day have it because it's a really vital part of serving our community. And as you can imagine, the needs greatly outpace the resources and the capacity. So we're fingers crossed, hopefully one day we'll have a pro bono department. But for right now, we do a lot of pro se clinics in the community. In terms of direct representation, we also focus on unaccompanied children, just because that's where the majority of our mentors are. We do a lot of asylums, SIJS, T visas, and U visas.
And Alexa.
Hi, I'm Alexa Sandukis. I'm with the Galveston Houston Immigrant Representation Project based in Houston, Texas, with a satellite office in Galveston. We go by GURP, and GURP is a fairly new and small nonprofit. We similarly do not have an independent pro bono program, but we do incorporate it into all of our programs. And on my team, the Immigrant Children and Youth team, we have utilized pro bono assistance for clinics, for individual cases, as well as for appellate work. And we similarly seek to engage pro bono assistance due to the demand in the Houston community. I know you heard from 3 other Houston providers yesterday about how they're implementing various clinics and workshops as well. And we love to collaborate with other legal service providers, as well as recruit and retain our own pro bono attorneys.
So we're going to start off by talking about our first common challenge, but again, don't worry, we will get to solutions too today. And so that's finding and keeping pro bono attorneys, right? And so as it pertains to, finding pro bono attorneys, something we hear a lot from, different attorneys who we speak to and trying to recruit them for the work we do is that immigration is scary, right? So I can't tell you how many experiences with even these litigators at really big law firms, people who are very, very comfortable being attorneys, being in courtrooms, and they are absolutely terrified of anything involving immigration. It's kind of funny because, in immigration court, right, the rules of evidence are pretty loose. Things aren't as structured as they can be, right, in real courts. Yet immigration is still scary. It's a very common theme that we hear.
In addition to the field of law being intimidating, the timeframes of our cases are often challenging for pro bono assistance. As you all probably know, a non-detained removal proceeding goes on for years and years, and it doesn't even start sometimes until you've been in the US for several years. And it all seems entirely arbitrary. So this is a unique experience for some lawyers who are used to practicing in other fields of law. And the same goes for affirmative applications for relief with USCIS. So it is a challenge to not only recruit these pro bono attorneys, but also retain them over the course of the case. And that plays out in many ways. One way is that you have to build rapport with the client, but you also have to maintain it through their various life changes. Many clients move, change phone numbers, get married, maybe get arrested, a lot of big life events which can affect their case, and you need to make sure that they reach out with that information when it happens. Another challenge is maintaining client communication for some of our more involved clients that want updates regularly on how their case is going. So when you have a pro bono attorney on a case, it can be challenging if they're not expecting these long time frames and this ongoing client communication needs.
Location is also a challenge. And so, maybe in some of the larger cities, there might be more attorneys that are willing to do pro bonos, but especially in remote locations, it can be really challenging to find pro bono attorneys. So within my jurisdiction, the state of Tennessee is a large state, right? And so I have clients that are all the way from Memphis, where I am, to Nashville, to Chattanooga, but then all the small towns in between, right? So finding pro bono attorneys in all of those small areas can be really difficult, especially when it comes to getting guardianships and things for special immigrant juvenile status. Northern Mississippi I can't even pay people to get guardianships for me in Northern Mississippi. No one is willing to do it. And so finding a pro bono is nearly impossible. So it's really difficult in some locations. And then for, as probably all of us know, immigration attorneys don't have to be barred in that state, right? So I'm in Tennessee, but I'm barred in Pennsylvania. And so, that limits what I'm able to do and what other immigration attorneys are able to do, even if they'd be willing to help with special immigrant juvenile status. If they're not barred in the state I need them, they don't serve they don't help in any way. And then that's, the next point as well, right? Having that state license for the predicate order, that's just so vital for that kind of case.
So a lot of, private firm attorneys have these really high, billable requirements, and it makes it really challenging, even if they're really, really kind of supportive of the work we do and the mission of our organizations. It can often be limiting to them as far as what they're able to do pro bono work wise, especially when it's in the immigration sphere. And so, some law firms actually allocate hours that attorneys can bill towards pro bono. It's always great if you can ask, right, if there are any allotments for pro bono. I think that's actually really helpful. Not just in kind of seeing kind of what the temperature is at that respective firm regarding pro bono work, but also what the realities are as far as what capacity attorneys may or may not have. It kind of gives you a snapshot in advance. So, if they have a certain amount of hours that maybe doesn't kind of equate to the amount of hours that might be necessary for the asylum case you're trying to place, for example, those are things that you might have to keep in mind, that even though, and most attorneys, right, go into doing pro bono work because they mean well. It's not that they are bad people. They're people who want to do the work, but the reality is, as far as capacities, availabilities, requirements for hours can impede that. So it's kind of a way to get a snapshot of where things could potentially go with the pro bono placement if there aren't enough hours allocated.
Another thing that we see a lot is pro bonos wanting winning or sexy cases, right? Everybody wants the case that could be turned into a Hollywood manuscript, but we know that that's not the reality, right? These cases drag on for really years. For many years, they can be boring sometimes, and sometimes there's really no resolution. So it's important to have a conversation with the pro bono attorney. I try to be as transparent as possible without discouraging them. Conversations about long time frames, about commitments. I don't tell them what their likelihood of success is, even though I constantly get that question. I tell them how they have the power to change someone's life, although they always seem to manage to find that one webpage that lists the asylum grant rates for all of the judges in every jurisdiction, and they freak out. But it really is about reframing success, right? And there's a lot of free material out there about how you can reframe success. It may not mean the green card, I wish it was, but sometimes it's just the work permit, but that changes someone's life. Our CEO always says, every single day that your client is in this country is a win. Every single day they're not deported is a win. And so you may have to have this conversation with them at various junctures throughout their representation to remind them, why they're doing this, and that step by step, they are gaining. But we do get a lot of people frustrated with how slow things are going. They feel it's sluggish, especially out of the gate. They want to do a lot of things, but we all know the time frame with immigration law is really wonky and unpredictable. So we do see that a lot, unfortunately.
And another challenge we face is, simply put, the language capability. Since a lot of our clients are not English speakers, we often try and find pro bono attorneys who speak the language of the client or have readily available access to interpreters. In Houston, we mostly are looking for Spanish speakers in the kids context. And luckily for some of our cases that are funded by VERA, there is a provision for free telephonic interpretation for Spanish, but not all of our cases are covered by that grant, and some of the other grants do not provide that ability. So it's on the pro bono attorney to find their own translation services. We also have seen increasing number of children that speak indigenous languages, which is more difficult to find an interpreter for. And so this is something that you have to set expectations at the very beginning as well.
So we'll move on now to our solutions to finding and keeping pro bono attorneys and those disappearing pro bono attorneys. And so, we can't promise that we'll give you kind of the magic trick to solving all things pro bono in our, 1 hour panel today, but we do have some solutions, and we're excited to share what's been working in our respective states, right? So I'll let Stacy take it away with the online platforms.
So uh, there's various online platforms for recruiting pro bono attorneys. Obviously, there's Pro Bono Matters that CILA runs. That if you don't use, you should use. But there's also other platforms out there. I use We the Action, which is a platform for more generic law, right? So it's not just immigration. So you get different types of people that go to that kind of website. Another thing that's been really successful for us, part of our pro bono program, we've created pro bueno happy hours. My boss loves a good pun. And so we have pro bueno happy hours. And we find a local attorney who's already kind of bought into our mission, right? So someone who is willing to put their name and reputation out there, in support of our organization. And so, for example, we recently had a happy hour with one of our pro bono attorneys, and it was just a small gathering, literally in the lobby of this law firm, right? But she was able to invite all the other attorneys at her firm and also her entire network of other family law attorneys, right? So she was able to, go beyond the network that I have, or, a lot of these people I had also reached out to, but they don't know who I am, right? But they know who she is, and they're more likely to actually open her email or her text message when she contacts them. And so having that kind of host to a person to serve as a host for that happy hour is really good to be able to get people in the door. And then, it's then my job to tell them about our work and what pro bono attorneys can do and things like that. And, having pictures of the happy clients with their green cards and that kind of thing, right? And show them how, even if they're just serving as a guardian ad litem or just doing the guardianship piece of the case, what the outcome of that case can be and how it actually changes people's lives, even if they think that that portion is just a small bit. And then what I also do for to try to find pro bono attorneys is offering CLEs in exchange for taking a case, right? So I can offer the CLE credit for you for free, but I need something in return, right? And so I host CLEs on special immigrant juvenile status or on asylum and declaration drafting, things like that. And I go through the effort of getting all the CLD approvals for, the various states around me. So that way it kind of helps people, have some incentive to take a case.
So bar associations are a really particularly good area to tap into for pro bono coordination. When I started working at AI Justice, I was really, really excited to be an immigration attorney, right? But in doing unaccompanied children's work specifically, that's so heavy on the special immigrant juvenile status work, I learned very quickly that I also needed to learn how to be a family law practitioner, right? So I didn't want to be going into state court with the judges and the other parties looking at me saying, this is the immigration attorney in family court, right? I wanted them to look at me like I was an equal family law practitioner. Even though I was able to build those skills, and that obviously has been pivotal in providing the proper support and mentorship needed to pro bono attorneys in the context of seeking the specific findings for SIJS, I think it's still common, right, for certain issues to come up where it's really beneficial to have family law connections. So taking advantage of making connections with the family law section of the bar has helped me to kind of create and build a network that maybe those people aren't specifically taking on cases pro bono, but if I have a pro bono attorney working on a case and we have a question about something procedural in family court, I can reach out to those family law section contacts. If we're assigned, for example, to a judge who I haven't had a case with before, or in a county that I don't regularly practice in, I can reach out to, someone who's a family law practitioner day in and day out to say, hey, are you familiar with this judge? What kind of procedures does this judge prefer? Are there any specific way that pleadings should look that's going to make them feel more comfortable and to make this case that we're presenting before them go as smoothly as possible? So I really encourage you to, look into those bar association relationships and also kind of utilizing attorneys in different ways to where maybe they're not actually the ones handling the case, but they're providing a really, really important support as far as getting the pro bono case properly mentored.
We have also looked into bar association sections, primarily targeting the ones that are more likely to have an interest in taking an immigration case. So in Houston, the Mexican American section is quite active. We've turned to them, as well as more obviously the immigration section. So I have in the past done an asylum workshop with the immigration section, and it was part of their kind of annual meeting and service trip. And it was very easy to have a very mini training before they then met with clients and prepared applications. And that was a pretty seamless event. Another source we have looked to recruit pro bono attorneys is attorneys ad litem from our SIJ predicate proceedings. So I did have a proceeding last year that was a super urgent case, very sympathetic. We had to publish citation on an unknown respondent, and so an attorney ad litem was appointed from the wheel, so very randomly. And I found this attorney ad litem to be extremely sympathetic and willing to work with me on the case, especially on a tight turnaround, as well as the fee she charged at the end of the case was much lower than she normally would. So I then used that to reach out to her after the case had concluded to see if she had any interest in taking on pro bono or low bono cases, and she did. So it was a very fruitful connection.
So our next solution, which I am very excited to talk about because I feel like this is so important, is really ensuring that you have strong program management. You know, we've kind of gotten through, all right, you were all creative in getting these attorneys. Now, how do we ensure that we can, keep them and make this process be as smooth of a process? So onboarding is really important. There's not always going to be a way to control the pro bono relationship. Sometimes things do fall through, but many times, it's really all reliant on what the foundation was when the case was initially placed. So one of the documents actually that will be shared as part of today's panel is a document I use with all of my pro bono attorneys called the pro bono policies. And that's really important because it covers the scope of representation. That way things are very clear from the start, right? So you never want a situation where it's unclear as far as, for example, if the child is put into proceedings, who's going to be covering that portion of it? Is the attorney solely going to be covering, obtaining the predicate order for SIJ, or solely going to be covering filing for asylum? What is it exactly that this attorney is agreeing to cover pro bono? All of that should be laid out from the beginning. And I think it's really helpful to have that written clearly in your pro bono policies, right? In addition to that, the pro bono policies I have list out the responsibilities of the pro bono attorney as well as the client. And it has information on kind of getting started with their case, right? So the majority of the attorneys I work with pro bono are not immigration practitioners. So in many ways, that also serves as their initial user guide, right? So how do you register to appear before the court? How do you, step by step, how do you check if your client is scheduled for court? It walks them through all of these things so they have it in one place. And something useful also in those pro bono policies is it very clearly has language where the pro bono attorney has to confirm that they're in good standing and licensed in every state where they practice, that they have no issues as far as their licensing. So these are all like good ways that you can ensure that from the start, you have strong program management and making the placement one that's most efficient as possible. The last recommendation I have tied with that as well is we have confidentiality agreement and social media disclaimer that we have all pro bono attorneys sign. And that might seem a little odd at first because we all know as attorneys, obviously, that you have a duty to maintain confidentiality. But in many ways, it's to kind of big picture control situations where, for example, an attorney might get really excited about this case they're working on, and suddenly, they're posting about it on social media and they mean well, but they don't realize the huge repercussions this can have on someone, first of all, a child, so a minor, but also someone who's going through the immigration process. So really, to kind of ensure that everything has the highest chance of being a successful pro bono case placement, and to really encourage pro bono attorneys to take more cases, you want to make sure you have strong program management onboarding.
So I, excuse me, I also use office hours as a way of being accessible to my pro bono attorney. So, of course, I'm the mentor for all of my pro bono attorneys, and they can always email me, right? But I get 700 emails a day, and so sometimes it takes me a couple of days to get back to them with an answer. And so some people would rather, talk to me directly without having to go back and forth on email. And so what I've done is pick 1 hour a day, or sorry, 1 hour a week, that I'm just available, right? So I have a Zoom that I sit in there sometimes by myself, but I'm available there. All my pro bonos have the link to that Zoom meeting. And if anyone wants to come in and talk about their case, I'm there to answer whatever questions that they have. And so not only do they have access to me, but then, if more than one pro bono comes in on a given day or a given time, they can hear what's happening in other people's cases, and, potentially get some help by hearing the challenges that other people are having as well. In terms of recognition, so we do an annual pro bono award. So we find one of our pro bonos that's stood out that year in order to recognize them, and actually give them an award, right? So last year we recognized our attorney in Nashville, who she does all of my guardianships in Nashville, which is a large number of guardianships. She does all of them for pro bono. I've offered to pay her money. She refuses to take any of my money. She just wants to be able to help all of these kids. And so, we recognized her last year. And so now when I do, the happy hours, I have a slide in my PowerPoint, right, about, recognizing her for the huge impact that she's had on our program. The other thing that I use to recognize and or bribe people to do pro bono work for me is I love baking, and I make very delicious cookies. And so I bribe people by giving them cookies when they do pro bono work for me, right? And I tell them straight up, right? When I'm recruiting people, I'm like, if you do this, I'll give you cookies. And sometimes at the events, I'll have cookies there. I'm like, remember how delicious those were? You can have more. You just had to do a pro bono case for me. And so it's just that kind of a way of recognizing their work by giving them a small token of appreciation.
I wanted to also flag that there are pro bono manager or coordinator associations that exist. They're really helpful as far as building your skills as a pro bono manager, and also building your connections. In Florida, we actually have an organization called the Florida Pro Bono Coordinators Association. And essentially kind of the bigger nonprofits or all the legal aids throughout the state have a representative, whoever's kind of leading their pro bono coordination efforts, who's a member of that organization. And that's been a really, really helpful organization to connect with, from the side of seeing what other people are doing, right? What works, what doesn't work. That's how we all learn. But also in many ways, it's been helpful because the members of that organization are coordinating pro bono in all kinds of areas of the law, not just immigration. So oftentimes, a client who maybe we're assisting pro bono, placed with pro bono, and their immigration case has something else come up, right? That's pretty common. Other issues come up. And it's really helpful to know who we can refer people to. So kind of on the flip side, somebody gets an immigration case, they know to reach out to us at Americans for Immigrant Justice. And that's been a really, really helpful network to build. On a national scale, there's also NABPRO, actually, the National Association of Pro Bono Coordinators. That is a fee-based organization. There's a membership fee, but it's pretty nominal. But it really has been extremely useful, once again, on like a bigger scale, to see what people are doing nationwide as it pertains to pro bono management and coordination. So our next solution is piecemeal assignments. So kind of finding ways in which you can place bite-sized pro bono opportunities.
So we've talked about this a couple of times now, but we recruit non-immigration attorneys to do the SIJ predicate order piece of that work. So what I always stress to non-immigration attorneys, because, immigration's scary, as we've talked about previously, that, I want attorneys to focus on what their expertise is, right? So if a family law attorney is regularly in probate court or regular getting guardianships or custodies or, whatever juvenile order we need for SIJ, then let them embrace that, right? They don't have to change really anything about what they do. They already know the procedures, they already know the judges, that kind of thing. And we just have to include that extra language for the SIJ findings, which is an easy, plug-in for their petitions and orders. And so, I just focus on the fact that they're already experts in that area. And so let's embrace that. We also use, so part of the piecemeal thing is doing limited representation. And so we talked about the GAL and guardianships, but in the asylum context, I have pro bono attorneys that are focused on just declaration drafting. So they'll meet with the client and spend those hours, getting deep into the client's story and putting together a declaration that, of course, I'll help edit and that kind of thing. And then also brief writing, that kind of thing. So you can just piecemeal each part of the case, and that can kind of get different types of people, that might be more interested in client work. They can work on declaration draft. They might hate client work and only want to do brief writing, or, some combination. And then it also kind of opens it up to, non-attorneys too, right? A good paralegal can do great work on declaration drafting. And so we like to be creative in that, or even, law clerks, people that have graduated law school, haven't passed the bar yet, that can work too. For my organization, we also help people do change of addresses and change of venue requests with the immigration court. And so, anyone who needs that service, even if they're not our client, we can help them with that part. Again, it's a very limited scope, and it's in and out, and we get it done. And then on the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about workshops, but we host workshops for asylum specifically at our organization, so people can come in, get some work done, and leave, and not have to have that ongoing responsibility for that case.
So I wanted to share a little bit about some of kind of the credible fear context where we've had a lot of success at Americans for Immigrant Justice with limited scope opportunities. Obviously, this isn't relevant to unaccompanied children, the CFIs, but just to give an example, as far as creating limited scope opportunities, we can kind of split things up in the CFI context to where people can assist solely with preparation or solely with accompanying someone to their interview, for example. And the benefit there is, just even having somebody sitting in, let's say, in the interview to kind of keep an eye, monitor, kind of even control, I would say, an officer from going rogue because they know someone's watching them. Same kind of idea, even in the immigration court context, like for those reviews of negative credible fear decisions, to where, people can kind of see what's happening on the court side. The judge may be kind of, stay more in line if they see that people are watching them. And I think this is also kind of inspiring to us to kind of get creative of how this might work or be transferable to the UC context. So a lot of courts sometimes have solely juvenile dockets or detained dockets for children in ORR custody. You could maybe initially get pro bono attorneys to agree to just be a court observer, right? So to go in and sit in on those dockets. And then kind of the benefit of that, once again, is keeping people in line who maybe otherwise would have been a little bit more flexible for kind of going off the rails a bit. but also it's a way to get pro bono attorneys enticed with the work we do, right? Because oftentimes, as we all know, they will see injustices and people get really fired up and inspired. And I think then they can turn around and say, you know what, I have to take on an unaccompanied children's case. Please give me a case. So I just wanted to share that.
Something that's worked really well for us at CLS Miami is recruiting BIA appeal ghostwriters. And this was born out of the need for appeals. Our contract does not include the appeals process. We'll file the notice of appeal, but that's it. It's then incumbent upon the client to find their own attorney to write the brief. A lot of times it didn't happen. So we were seeing most of our clients come back to us asking us to do it. It's really hard to say no when you've had a relationship with that child for so many years. And so our attorneys were doing it themselves on the weekends. It was very taxing. So we were trying to think of what we can do. Funnily enough, I just realized that we started this program in October because it was Pro Bono Appreciation Month. And I think we billed it as get spooky with us and come be a ghostwriter for a BIA appeal. But it's really good. It appeals to like all my fellow introverts out there because you don't have to take a direct rep case. You don't really need to talk to anybody. It's great for strong writers and for people who want to contribute, right? We all have different things to contribute. And so for those strong writers out there who don't want to go to court, who maybe aren't great with client rapport, this is really great for them. It's an excellent opportunity, an intro in immigration law for people in law firms because, and I think this is coming up on one of the slides, they can do it together, right? They can do it in a cohort and they're going to have supervision. They're going to have their supervising attorneys looking over that. So not only are you going to be supervising it, but it's going to be pretty perfect by the time it gets to you, in my experience, because it's gone through so many levels of supervision and revision within the law firms. And another great resource for this are appellate law clinics. And we are so grateful for the ones that we pair with because they have lots of students, lots of time, and it gives them the opportunity to practice their legal writing. And something that we do with this is we pre-write our briefs, right? Because even though the immigration law is going to change, you know what it's like. You get that notice, the briefing schedule, you have 2 weeks to submit it. So a lot of times, you know, it's just too hard to put together all at once. But these appellate clinics and the law firm volunteers are able to pre-write these with the facts that are in evidence. You know, if we've taken strong notes during the individual hearing, and they're able to put together a lot of it beforehand, and then we can pop in the analysis at the end. Some of them do want to be the attorney on record, but the majority prefer to stay as ghostwriters. The hardest part of this, the sell, is the time frame, right? Like you're going to get this and you have 2 weeks to turn it around. And then that's when we started the pre-writing. And that seems to have taken care of a lot of the problems with that. But if you find yourself in a situation like we did, where you just have all of these briefing schedules coming in, I would recommend reaching out to the big law firms and the appellate clinics in your community.
Another piecemeal assignment we've explored, similar to what Sarah was talking about with BIA appeals, other appellate briefing, such as federal litigation. So at GURP, we've just started building out our federal litigation program, but through our normal work with unaccompanied children, we have come to be involved in several different matters where we've requested pro bono assistance, and appellate briefing is also quite appealing to law firms, especially people who have litigation experience, and they also have ample resources that can assist in this litigation. It's also, we've also worked with law school clinics, including just the immigration clinic at a local law school, because this is their bread and butter, legal research and writing. And it's something that with our high caseloads, we often don't have the time to dedicate to the research and writing that we would like to. So pro bono assistance can be very helpful with federal litigation. And at GURP, I was going to give 2 examples. So our executive director just argued a case of the Fifth Circuit last month that was a very sympathetic case that went through several levels of appeal and reconsideration and reopening and went to the district court, then finally ended up at the Fifth Circuit, and we're still waiting on a decision there. But we utilized pro bono assistance throughout that case at various junctures from both law firms and law school clinic students. And we also engaged a law firm to help us do some mass FOIAs for records related to MPP removal orders that were executed on children who re-entered as unaccompanied children, and they were not put into new proceedings. They were removed based on the old MPP order. And we were working with Justice Action Center and YMCA International Services to do that FOIA, with a law firm spearheading the whole thing. And then when perhaps unpredictably, the FOIA responses were not what we were looking for, we ended up suing all of the immigration agencies. And so that is a case where the law firm has been very useful as a pro bono. And again, like others have said, the goal is, yes, these may be the sexier cases, the more interesting cases. Once you hook them into this work, they see the people involved, they see these very sympathetic stories, you can perhaps use them in the more run-of-the-mill cases as well.
Our next solution involves the benefits, and we'll also share examples of workshops.
So we love workshops. We do a lot of pro se workshops in the community. We do a lot of naturalization, mega events, TPS, pro se asylum. It's a lot of work to mentor a pro bono attorney on one case. It's totally worth it, but it's a lot of work. But if you can do these with the community, you can help hundreds of people at the same time. And the pro bono volunteers love it because it's a very limited time commitment. It's scheduled. They know they're going to be out at a certain time. They can calendar it. You can do it on the weekend, so it doesn't interfere with their work schedule. And it's great for everyone. And they tend to be really kind of like jovial and fun. It's especially great for transactional attorneys who are missing that client contact. And for law students, we have lots of law students who participate. You know, you're in the throes of 1L year and you want to go back to base and remember why you went to law school in the first place. And we have found their participation really great. And in the workshops, this is probably where we get the most volunteers coming back to us because they have a really good time. They get to work with somebody one-on-one. They have something tangible at the end of it, an asylum application or a TPS application, and they've made a difference in a relatively short amount of time. These require a lot of work behind the scenes, but again, I think it's really worth it. You can help a large number of people in a short amount of time. And we keep talking about the winning cases of the sexy cases where we don't have that. Well, in this scenario, they get that instant gratification, right? They're talking to that person, they can see the smile on their face. The good thing is you can do these on Zoom, you can do them in person. We do a lot of hybrid events. We have them catered, we get t-shirts. It's just fun. And another benefit, another selling point of this is networking. A lot of attorneys moving into the area, they don't have immigration experience, but they want to expand their practices, especially solo practitioners. This way they can meet other people in the community, immigration experts, immigration attorneys, and they can build their network and they can get to meet people. So the workshops have lots and lots of benefits. And again, like I'll say, the high rate of re-engagement, I think that is, it's just very telling in itself.
I share Sarah's enthusiasm for workshops. At GURP, we love to collaborate with other legal service providers that are doing these workshops in the community. And we have a small staff at GURP, and so we don't have attorneys that are dedicated to mentoring pro bono attorneys. All of our attorneys have their own caseloads, as well as some cases with pro bono assistance. So workshops are a way to utilize our strength and create efficient solutions for having pro bono attorneys who may be new to this work and need a lot of training and mentorship, but then can be part of an ongoing relationship. And so one thing that I'm trying to plan in the moment is a 2-day SIJ workshop where it will be focused on obtaining the predicate orders in Harris County through a suit affecting the parent-child relationship, or a SAPSR, which all of us in Houston have been doing for some time. And I know that there is a presentation right after this one where they're going to go into detail on workshops, including SIJ workshops, because our colleagues at KIND have had occasion to do these in various cities in the US. But what I'm trying to plan is a 2-day workshop. I'm tentatively spacing the days 3 months apart. And the goal is we have a law firm that's interested. They don't have any experience with SIJ predicate proceedings, but they have incoming associates who are fresh off law school and taking the bar and hopefully are eager to get involved in the court. And so obviously these cases we always promote as being a great way for new attorneys to get courtroom experience as first chair. So we have a law firm. We're planning to give them a CILA at their offices beforehand, as well as sign people up for the workshop at the CILA so that we can very concretely tie the CILA to workshop participants with case examples and really everything they would need to know in order to get them interested in coming to our offices for a workshop, which will be a few weeks thereafter for day one. And my goal is that attorneys as well as legal assistants will come, they will meet with the clients, and they will prepare the pleadings to get these petitions filed. In the interim, they will work with the clients to effectuate service and any other things that may arise with mentorship, ongoing office hours, templates, the typical arrangement. And then 3 months later, they'll come back for another day, meeting with the clients again, preparing the substantive declarations that we use as evidence for the prove up hearings, as well as potentially, if there's time, practicing testimony with the person petitioning for these kids' custody. It may be a bit ambitious. We're going to see how it all works out. But of course, I'm talking to others who have done versions of this before. And I'm hoping it can help us increase the number of kids who are SIJ eligible who we can serve, because I've come to realize our wait list is full of SIJ eligible kids and they are not finding placement otherwise. And unlike asylum, which is something you can the process you can initiate pretty easily before they turn 18, because Texas is under 18 state for the most part. These SIJ predicate proceedings, you need an attorney to do it, and there just aren't enough Houston attorneys that are doing these cases and are doing them affordably. So I'm very excited to try out this workshop model, and I'm very excited to hear the next presentation in this symposium.
So in the asylum context, we have started to embrace the UIR 61 limited representation policy that UIR enacted, I think, the end of last year, as a way of helping individuals file their asylum applications that we don't, as an organization or even on a pro bono basis, don't have the capacity to take on the full asylum case. And so what we want to do is create, a Saturday morning that we get pro bono attorneys and we get the clients to come and they focus on filling out just the 589 application, right? And not worrying about all the country conditions and the brief and the everything else that goes with it, but focus just on the 589, that then by the time everybody leaves, at the end of the day, we can then file with the court and serve DHS with a copy of it. And so the biggest reason that we really wanted to do this is that we can at least help people make sure that they're meeting their 1-year deadline with this, because as we all know, that's super important. If they miss that deadline, then that takes asylum off the table for them in most cases. And then by filing the 589, it buys people time to either get off of a wait list at a nonprofit or save money to hire a private attorney, but they haven't lost their right to file for asylum because they've missed that 1-year deadline. And so one warning that I would give about this is that not all immigration courts and the clerks that work at these courts know what an EOIR 61 is. Some of them appear to have never heard of this ever in their life, which is an issue at the court level. Maybe some more training is needed, but I would warn you that if this is something that you are going to do, to follow up after you filed with the court to make sure that the court actually processed it as an EOIR 61 limited rep and not as an E28 entry of appearance, right? I've done E61s on various types of cases, and in a large number of them, the court, because they don't know what a EOIR 61 is, they just process it as a E28. And then I have to go through that extra step of one, training the clerks what E61 is, but then getting them to process it correctly. So that way I or the pro bono attorney is not, tied to that case, because that's not the point of the E61, right? It's to avoid that. And so I would just, put that warning out there that there is that extra step to just make sure that the court is doing it properly.
We also wanted to talk about cohorts, which are essentially placing several cases of the same type, even better if it's of the same theory, with kind of one set pro bono partner. So this has been really effective. You connect with a big firm, they pull together kind of several attorneys who are going to be working on several cases, and you train them all at once, right? So it's really effective as far as having a high impact, because you're able to place a higher amount of or larger amount of cases. And it's, something I've heard really good responses from the firm partners, from the firm partners, because they're able to kind of internally, the different teams working on the cases that they've taken on, talk to each other about what progress they're making in their cases. They're able to share resources that have been built. So maybe one team has started working on a draft, and the draft, of the brief, for example, looks really great. So they can share it with the other attorneys who are part of the cohort. You can have cohort meetings where everybody kind of in the same place is able to ask their questions. So you're answering questions all at the same time. So I highly recommend the cohort model as a way to really higher scale and larger scale place more cases in an efficient way. And so back to those disappearing pro bono attorneys, right? We talked a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm aware that we're running out of time, but all of our information is going to be on the last slide. So if any of you guys want to talk to us more about the next couple of slides and we run out of time, I encourage you to email or call us. I'll try to make this brief. So disappearing pro bonos, big problem, right? What do we do? How can we avoid that? One thing, and Angela touched on this, is having that strict policy talk beforehand. Being thorough and being maybe a little extra in the beginning is going to save you that pain down the line, or can save you that pain down the line. You want them to take this serious. You want them, this is their client now. We're not here to be co-counsel. We are placing this case with you. So I think if you impart upon them the seriousness of it, and then what I do is I constantly tell them how grateful we are that they are taking the case. And I try to slip in that one of the reasons why I'm so grateful is because we don't have capacity to do so. There are 400 kids on our waiting list. We have 6 attorneys who are handling 600 cases, something like that. I try to hide it, but I try to get it in there. And one of the things that in the beginning, I would take back these cases, and then I ended up with all these cases that I didn't have room for. So now what I do, I bombard them with positivity and solutions, which is something I hate when people do to me, but I do it to them. Oh, you're pregnant? Guess what? This case isn't going to be scheduled for 2 years. Your kid's going to be a toddler by the time this case is heard. You're moving? Immigration court's hybrid. I just keep going at them with relentless positivity and solutions until they either keep the case or I see that they filed a notice to withdraw with the court, which does happen sometimes, but more often it's the former and not the latter. So I keep at it, right? And then this one, cultural competency talk. I got this from a great pro bono director at Ackerman. we can't all be culturally competent in our clients' cultures, but we can practice cultural humility. The number one reason that attorneys give cases back to me is because they say their client is non-responsive. Part of this goes back to the language issue, which is why with the certain opportunities we've talked about today, like workshops and the ghostwriting, are great for the pro bono attorneys who speak English only, or they don't speak the language of the client. But a lot of this is miscommunication, and it comes down to cultural differences, especially with the children. They don't have control over their cell phone bills, over whether or not they can get a ride to the office. I've had clients tell me that they didn't want to bother me because they didn't think they were important enough, which is really heartbreaking. But if you have this conversation with the attorney up front and let them know, hey, if this person isn't from the same background as you, you need to bear that in mind. I find that it goes a long way down the line. If they're having communication issues, they have that extra level of patience, and they stop and they think, okay, what could be going on in this person's life? Because we all have our own lives, and sometimes we only see things through our lens, but it helps them to see things through the lens of someone who's maybe from a very different culture than them, who speaks another language, who's at a different socioeconomic level. This is why I strongly advocate for in-person meetings if possible. I mean, a huge selling point has been remote representation, but if at any point you can get your pro bono attorney and their new client together in a room, I find that a lot of problems are much easier, not sure if that's a word, solved that way than remotely.
And so law firms often have pro bono coordinators, pro bono partners. This is usually in the context of the bigger firms. So if you're working with like a boutique firm or solo practitioner, that might not be kind of an infrastructure in place. But I wanted to talk about, that person and why their role is so important, right? So first and foremost, it's always good to go through the pro bono coordinator, the pro bono contact, whoever that lead is for pro bono matters at the respective pro bono contact firm, because you want to make sure that the case is kind of actually on the radar of the firm. So these firms have a lot of money, right, that they want to put towards pro bono, money that we as nonprofits will never have. But if it's not a case that's kind of been officially gone through their channels, cleared conflict, it's not necessarily that you'll be able to benefit from that. As it pertains to the disappearing pro bono attorneys as well, it's huge to be able to have that contact, because for whatever reason, if you don't know what's happening with the case, you're not getting a response back, you have someone who you can reach out to say, hi, I just wanted to check in. I've reached out a few times to this person, not in a way that you're like telling on them, but more so just to say, oh, that, they might be busy, or I don't know if they have something going on personally. Maybe they've left the firm. Whatever it is, that person is going to be a huge asset in assisting you with making sure that the pro bono placement doesn't fall through. And lastly, we just wanted to highlight, before we get to the final slide that shows our contact information, the helpful documents that we have provided as part of this presentation. So the limited representation retainer, guidelines for pro bono representation, a pro bono referral contract, and lastly, those pro bono policies I mentioned earlier. So our contact information is here. Please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or anything. I don't believe I saw anything come in through the chat as far as current questions, but anyone from CILA, let me know if I missed that otherwise, or the Commission on Immigration. And thank you so much again, everyone, for joining us today. We really appreciated having the opportunity to share with you.